Hi team, you know what it is. We are back with another dose of that high strength spiritual bleach to burn through those common and persistent blockages that many seekers find on this path to awakening, this path to enlightenment. And we know there's no real such thing as a blockage there. Often there is simply a gap in our understanding or a misunderstanding, just a small gap in our spiritual knowledge, and this gap manifests as the felt sense of something being blocked or as some kind of thin, shadowy veil of the mind. This is how the mind prevents you from realizing the truth, through obscuration, through doubt, through confusion. And so we like to just hit a big dose of that spiritual bleach to burn through that shadowy veil. Enlightenment is simply the removal of all that which endarkens our experience. So, today we are tackling and hopefully answering one of the big ones, which is the problem of sleep. If, as the teaching suggests, we are the infinite universal consciousness that is ever present, if we truly are the conscious awareness of being, and in fact the experience of the body-mind turns out to be, our life experience turns out to be, that you are the infinite consciousness that is aware of a body and mind. But this consciousness is not generated by the body and mind. That consciousness is always there, always ever present, constantly, eternally. And this experience of life is the manifestation of a body and mind that has arisen within consciousness. But it is not the body and mind that is generating consciousness. Now, if that is true, then how do we explain the fact that consciousness seems to disappear when we are asleep? Or otherwise unconscious. You've been knocked out, or you're unconscious for whatever reason. You're under anesthesia, or you're drunk, or something along those lines. Why is it, if you are the infinite universal consciousness, how can we have periods of time in which the body and mind is fully unconscious? It's a fair question. It really is a fair question. I think it belongs to those category of questions that we can say, fair enough. It seems to be proof of the biological model of consciousness, which is to say that consciousness is generated by and perpetuated by the brain. That consciousness is somehow dependent on brain activity in order for consciousness to be present. The brain needs to be active. So it seems that this phenomena of falling asleep and being unconscious for an apparent period of time seems to support the biological model of consciousness and seems to disprove the infinite universal consciousness theory. It seems to. So let's take a look at it. Let's take a look at it and let's explore the answer. What is the answer to this? It's actually remarkably simple, the answer. And for all of the complicated problems and questions that seem to arise on this path, actually, often when the answer just arises, and most often it just arises kind of as a natural intuition, it's a real face palm, because you're just like, that makes so much sense now. It's actually remarkably simple. However, as I was saying, the mind likes to veil and obscure. Stay with me on this. Stay with me, because although it's remarkably simple, this is one of those subjects where the mind wants to go diverting off into all kinds of different directions. And a single diversion that your mind takes you down, if you follow that thought, you might end up stuck on that train of thought for years and years and years. So stay with me right here. How do we answer the question, where does consciousness go when I sleep? Now, to begin answering this, we have to put your strongest material first, really. That's what I've been advised. So I'm going to put my strongest material first here. And the crucial understanding that we must come to, which, if we understand it fully, this is why this is an important question to answer, because if we can answer this one, where does consciousness go when I sleep, we are also, as a little Brucey bonus, as a free side order of spiritual fries along with this one, we also answer the question, where does consciousness go when I die? Now that's a big one, right? If not the biggest one. And where was consciousness before I was here? If it's infinite universal consciousness, where is it when I sleep? Where does it go when I die? And where was it before I was born? So hopefully by answering the question of where does it go when we sleep, we might get a little bonus on that one, the little Brucey bonus. We might get a little side order of answering another couple of questions too. So here is the crux of the answer. The absence of consciousness is not consciousness of absence. Now we really have this will bake your noodle. All right, we're in the business of baking noodles here, and business is good. So let's just run through this with a few different ways of saying this, different language for saying this. Awareness of absence is not the same as the absence of awareness. If you are aware of an absence, if you are aware of a blank space, that is not the same thing as the awareness not being present. And that is exactly what is happening when we are asleep. Consciousness never goes anywhere. Never. It never moves, it never changes, it never alters, it's not subject to any conditions. None whatsoever. It is always there. However, what happens is, for these periods of apparent time, for these periods of illusory time, there is the absence of the content of experience. We're going to just take a moment here just to really pull this in to presence, because I'm throwing a lot of cognitive stuff at you here, and I'm aware of the irony of using like the mind and cognition to try and understand this. So let's just pull it into true, deep spiritual introspection. Let's just pull this into the intuitive introspection that is so crucial to our spiritual practice. What if, for that period of time that the body and mind is asleep, consciousness is still there, only there is no longer the content of any experience for it to be aware of? What happens then? So if we say, so this is consciousness right here, and within that consciousness is the body and mind. Now, we assume that when we fall asleep, because the body and mind is now removed from that equation, consciousness is also removed. But what if we have the consciousness, the body and mind winks out of existence, but the consciousness remains there. Body and mind winks out of existence. Total blank. And then when the body wakes up, it reappears within that consciousness. Now, the bit that really seems to bake people's noodles, the bit that people get confused about, is surely if my body and mind vanishes and I am actually this infinite universal consciousness right here, that forms a C, doesn't it? I've only just thought of that, but that's a C right there. So consciousness, that C represents consciousness. the C right there, consciousness. If I am this consciousness, when the body and mind isn't there, surely I should be aware of something. Well, for that supposed period of time, we're going to get to this in a moment, the consciousness remains. It's just that there is simply nothing to be aware of. Okay, so that's our first little, the first thing we have to understand, digest, and it may be a case of pause the video and let's just work through this. I would do longer and longer pauses, but I'm trying as hard as I can to keep these videos short, team, so bear with me. So you might want to pause the video and come back at a later time, just digesting that point, that awareness, conscious awareness of absence is not the same as the absence of consciousness. Which is a bit of a noodle baker, I know, bit of a head scratcher, but that's the beginning. We don't have to get the whole thing straight away. That's just the beginning. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. Consciousness is always there. It's just that the element of experience, life as I usually understand it, which is the awareness of this body and mind, suddenly has vanished. There's no brain activity. And because there's no brain activity, there's no bodily sensation to be aware of either. It has shut down. Consciousness is still there, but it's just the body and mind has just winked out of existence for a short period of time. So, awareness of absence is not the same as the absence of awareness. The awareness of consciousness the absence of consciousness is not the same as consciousness of absence. These are different things. It's worth understanding there is a distinction between the two. So, moving into this next sort of part of this, because this is cognitive understanding that I'm working through right here. We're trying to sort of logically, step by step, come to a cognitive understanding. But the most crucial element of answering any of these kind of spiritual questions is that we have to have the felt understanding. It has to be experienced for yourself. The intuition has to kind of bypass the old cognition and bang, jack straight into the back of your head. So how do we come to that? Well, felt understanding of what I'm talking about here is, have you ever had an experience that you're not aware you are having? Or have you been consciously aware of every experience you've ever had? Have you ever had an experience that you weren't present, that you weren't consciously aware of having? Now, if we're not really thinking about it, we might say, yeah, I kind of do. Like, I have like days where I'm kind of, there are things happening in my life that I'm not consciously aware of, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about experience itself. We're talking about experience. Have you ever had an experience that you are not aware you are having? Really, it's worth answering this. Your entire life is experienced. Your entire life is an experience. Your entire life is one continual, unbroken experience. It is not the common way that we understand it, where it's like, well, it's segments of experience. We have these days, and so I experience a day, and then I fall unconscious, and then I experience another day. That's kind of how we commonly perceive it and frame it and create a narrative and understanding about it, but it's not true. It's not true. Your experience of life is one singular, unbroken stream of consciousness. And we say, but there are periods of time in which I've experienced unconsciousness. Have you? Really? Just double check that with yourself. Have you ever experienced being unconscious? Have you ever experienced being unconscious? By its very definition, it can never have happened, ever. It could not happen. There is no element of experience that you could possibly not be aware of having. Why? Because experience is made out of awareness. The substance of experience is awareness. It's what it's made of. In the same way that we have, if you look at a painting, a work of art, you can see pictures, you can see the landscape, you can see the scenery, and you forget that what you're actually looking at is paint. All paintings are made out of paint. But you don't go to an art gallery to look at paint. You don't go to an art gallery and say, you know what, today I'm gonna go visit this art gallery because what I want to see is a load of canvas squares with paint on them. That's not what you go to an art gallery to experience. What you go to an art gallery for is to see the paintings, to see what's been painted. And we forget routinely that all these paintings are made out of paint. No matter what painting you're looking at, you cannot deny the fact that you are looking at paint. That's what you're looking at. In exactly the same way, we forget that all of our experience is made out of consciousness. It's constructed from consciousness. The substance, the material of experience itself is consciousness. We often conceptualize things and say, no, the material of my thoughts, the material of my consciousness is my brain matter. It's the biological matter and cells and electrical impulses in my brain. That's the substance of experience. But it's not. In your experience, your conscious experience is made out of consciousness itself, in the same way that a painting is made of paint. So every single experience you have ever had is made out of awareness. Now, there is a vast multiplicity and diversity of experiences. We know that experiencing going to the dentist is very, very difficult. It is very difficult. I hate going to the dentist, which you can probably tell. It is very difficult, but it's very different to the experience of making love, which isn't quite so difficult, very enjoyable. So these are two vastly different experiences, and yet both of those experiences are experienced. And we are aware of both of them equally. Only the mind makes a distinction and says, I really don't like one, really don't like it, and I really like the other one, right? Don't like this, do like this. And so because of these distinctions, that's why we keep categorizing up everything into separate events, and we create these divisions and separations between things. But if we dropped away this tendency to analyze and create preferences, we come to the recognition. It's akin to, so let's go back to the art gallery thing. If you were in the art gallery and suddenly somebody pointed out that annoying thing about we're all just looking at squares of paint here, suddenly you are now, you're unable to let go of that new knowledge. It's a bit similar to the optical illusion thing. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. That's what it is. Once you've seen the optical illusion, the vase in the middle and the two faces, you now can't unsee it. So if you were in the art gallery and somebody pointed out that thing about how curious it is, like how interesting is this? We're looking at all these paintings and all these paintings are very different, but the one thing that each painting has in common is that it's made out of paint. Now that's exactly the same thing that's going to begin happening in awakening, and this is the enlightenment experience. Not that enlightenment is an experience, you can see why words are quite difficult here. I'm doing the best with the tools that I've got right here. I'm trying to paint a picture here, so to speak. So, oh man. So, the enlightenment is when you recognize, is when you can suddenly see the paint. You can see that you're not looking at paintings, you are looking at paint. That's it. That's what you come to recognize. Now, why is this relevant to the phenomena of sleep? Well, it's crucial to understand that you have never actually experienced being unconscious. There's nothing there, right? So you are the consciousness, and this is your element of experience. This is the paint, and suddenly the paint has gone. It's just a blank canvas. It's no longer a painting. Okay, so that then you would think this is just, I'm just building up the background knowledge you need in order to progress on to the next point. Okay, so understanding that. So firstly, we have the awareness of absence is not the same as the absence of awareness. Boom, we know that. We also know that all experiences are made out of awareness. Your entire life experience is made out of one thing. There is an apparent seeming constant flow and change of your life experience. Absolutely. Not denying that. Absolutely. But the one thing that all experiences share, all experiences have in common, is the presence of conscious awareness of that experience. If the consciousness wasn't there, there'd be no experience. In the same way, you can't look at a painting that doesn't have any paint in it. It's no longer a painting, right? So there's no pictures. The consciousness is the paint, essentially. So the consciousness is the paint and the canvas, ultimately, but the experience is the paint. I'm getting sidetracked. So we've got those two. And now thirdly, we're going to look at time. And herein lies the root of the confusion here. Because we say, well, this is the conscious awareness, this is the body and mind, it's winked out of existence for a period of time and then reappears. So that understanding, which is how most people perceive it, requires the concept of time. It requires time to exist in order for that to happen. The wink out period of time when you're unconscious and then it winks back in. If we remove time from the equation, are we getting there, team? Are we burning through this spiritual blockage right now? Is business booming in this business of baking noodles? Are we baking? Are we baking at 200 degrees right now? We are baking noodles. So without time, this winks out of existence and then winks back into existence in exactly the same moment. The fact that we perceive that we have been unconscious for a period of time is actually proof that the mind is creating time. The mind is not aware of something real called time. The mind has been creating the concept of time this entire time. So it winks out of existence and winks back in exactly the same moment. Exactly the same moment. You might think, well, that sounds kind of bananas. That sounds kind of fair trade bananas, Corinne. That sounds kind of bananas right here. But you must have experienced for yourself when you sleep and there have been no dreams present in that sleep. I'm speaking about dreamless sleep here. When you fall asleep and wake up, it feels instant, doesn't it? You go, woof, you sort of fall asleep and then you wake up and you're like, wow, that's weird. And then you look at your clock and you assume a period of time has passed because that's what the clock is saying. But the experience, what you actually experience in the phenomena of sleep, is you wink out of consciousness and wink back into consciousness at the same moment. But we're confused by this. The mind is confused. It is the mind that is confused. This is the bizarre thing about the mind. This is the hilarious, this is the cosmic joke, okay? It's often referred to as, when you get the cosmic joke, it's a real knee slapper, and it really is. It's a killer. In one manner of speaking, because the mind creates these concepts. The mind creates these rules, and then is confused by its own rules. It creates a rule and then sets about trying to explain why its own rule exists. So that is what the mind is confused by. Well, where was I during sleep? Oh, it must have been a period of time. But what was happening during that period of time? What happened to my conscious awareness during that period of time? There's no time. There is no time. It's created by the mind. There is no such thing. This is why presence is such an important thing to really understand, to really embody in our spiritual practice. Because if you are truly present and truly understand that time doesn't actually exist, it's just a mechanism of the way that we're perceiving reality. When you really truly get that time doesn't exist, all of these problems, everything I address in Spiritual Bleach, you figure this out for yourself. You don't need some maniac in a car yelling at a camera, because when you are truly present, when the concept of time dissolves, everything downstream from that, every single thing down there, it just resolves itself. And so this problem of, well, where do I go when I sleep? It completely is null and void by the recognition that time is a concept and does not exist in reality. And now we have this beautiful thing that happens when we initially thought that this thing proves that this thing about presence and this thing about infinite universal consciousness is wrong. Suddenly we realize, oh, actually this phenomena proves that it's right. It proves the validity of the infinite universal consciousness model. Consciousness remains. It's just there is just this flash where there is no element for the consciousness to be aware of. There's simply nothing there. And so experience is what disappears. Consciousness doesn't go anywhere. If we ceased looking back to that period of unconsciousness and go, yeah, but where was I during that time? We realize, oh, hang on a minute. I've never actually experienced. Stay with me, team, because this is about to get real deep. I've never experienced not being here. Can you remember a time you weren't here? It's not possible. Because if you weren't here, there was no experience, and therefore you wouldn't be able to remember it. You cannot remember a time that you weren't here. So what's another way of saying that? I've always been here. And we've established there's no such thing as time. It's constructed by the mind. So, ever present. What's another word for having always been here? What's another way of expressing that? We could say infinite, eternal. Ooh. Bruh. And we also then come at some point to, so hang on, Because sleep, in many ways, is kind of a bit like death, isn't it? The body and mind is no longer active. So it's kind of a bit like that, isn't it? We say rest in peace. We often refer to it as like the long sleep, the big sleep. The big sleep. And we worry about it. I'm in the Woody Allen camp. He said, death doesn't scare me. It's life that scares the hell out of me. Yeah, I'm kind of the same. But the point is, you don't fear going to sleep at night. You don't fear the absence of experience. Because on a deep, fundamental level, you are intuiting that the consciousness never actually goes anywhere. It's the experience that changes and just winks. It's just a little blink in and out. Now, I think that's enough on the concept of sleep. I don't want to start going on a little bit more into mortality and everything, because I am trying as hard as I can to keep these videos short and keep them to a single point where I can. So, as much as it pains me, I'll let you in behind the veil here, I like to go on to the next point, because we've just done all of that work establishing this point. So to go into, well, what happens when we die this would be a perfect time to do it, because we've just run through experientially where we go when we sleep. We've just ran through it. But we're gonna have to, that'll make a great thumbnail. There is no such thing as death. That'd make a fantastic thumbnail. So we'll save that for another video, I suppose. However, having said that, you can answer that question for yourself based on all the principles that we've just explored there in this video. You know exactly where that's going. You know exactly where that's going, team. I suppose it would be beneficial. Sorry, it's so hot in here. And also, I do apologise for my bloodshot eyes. I have to put this eye cream on to help me with my eczema, and it's making my eyes burn like crazy. So that's why they're kind of bloodshot. So, I suppose it would be beneficial to talk about, so what is the phenomena of dreaming? It's kind of mysterious dreaming, like even, scientists who supposedly know the truth can't quite answer that, but let's give it a shot. So personally, and there's going to be different takes on this, on what is dreaming, but our common experience of life in this supposed real world is almost like solid, hard imagination. That's how I kind of have come to perceive it. It's like dense, solid, hard imagination. There are rules. There are very, very clearly defined rules with hard lines and edges. We have the laws of gravity, and we have the laws of this, that, and the other, and we have the biological matter, and all of that is appearing within imagination. God made man in his image, right? In his image, in his imagination. Maybe a little step, but that's kind of how I'm interpreting it. But if this is all within the single mind of infinite universal consciousness, the real life as we experience it is actually just the part of the dream that has more rules. It just has more, and like time is one of those rules. Time is one of those imagined rules. Time is an imagined concept that helps to make the story believable. Because the best stories, even the fantasy stories that have some kind of magic system in there, they have hard rules to the magic system so that the reader, it's like if you're writing a story that has magic and you put a defined magic system in there, you're helping the reader, you're showing a lot of respect to the reader, because you can really engage with that story because you can imagine what it would be like. You understand the internal logic of what it would be like, oh, so how do I cast these spells? I say these words, I do these hand gestures, I use this specific material, and doing that gives us a repeatable result. Okay, so that's like how the magic works in this world. And so even in a fantasy setting, the rules can facilitate the story. Without the rules, it's too all over the place, and it destroys a story if a character's powers and abilities and magical spells are just random. If the character can fly 1 minute but then not the next. So a minute ago they were just flying because they can cast this spell, and now in the next scene they've got a massive problem because they need to cross over a cliff and the bridge is broken. You would go like, yeah, but hang on, that character can fly, so what's gone on here? So it would destroy the story. The rules have to be consistent and repeatable. And so how I perceive things is that this waking world reality is just a period of the dream in which we have the solid, consistent rule set. We have a solid, consistent internal logic that never really seems to change. I'm not going to put my hand straight through this roof no matter how many times I do it, it's going to happen. If I hold something up, if I hold up this bit of paper and drop it, it's going to happen every single time that I do it. My car's a bit messy. Just pop that one back in there. So, that's how, within the universal mind of consciousness, this is the part of the dream that has some seeming consistent rules so that we can enjoy the narrative. Now, when we fall asleep, we are removing some, but not all, of those rules. And that's why when we dream, we are experiencing what it would be like to live without a few of those rules. And this is why you might have dreams. Common one is there's fluctuations in gravity in dreams. You ever had those dreams where you can fully fly, so you know what it feels like to fly? And then you have other dreams where it's like, well, I can't fly all the time. I can sort of glide and float, things like that. You ever had those dreams? They're beautiful, very liberating dreams. You have these dreams where, and nightmares as well, you're running away from monsters and your feet aren't working well enough, or you're running in sand, those sorts of things. And this is close enough to our reality that it is somehow relatable, but the rules are just softer. There are less edges to the rules. So in a dream, I might be able to put my hand through the roof. In a dream, I might drop this and it just sort of stays there. In a dream, that might happen. So that's what I would suggest that dreaming is. It's no different to our everyday experience of life. And if you really get with this, you'll start lucid dreaming, which is really quite pleasant. Trust me. And, when you fall asleep and go into this supposed dream world, you've not actually gone anywhere. It's still an unbroken experience. We have the consciousness, we have the body and mind. It winks out of this particular body and mind, but it grows a little, expands. It expands a little. So this is body and mind, solid and dense. And what happens is it begins to expand. It expands into the infinite universal consciousness around it. So dreaming is when this just doesn't disappear entirely, it just expands. It becomes looser. It becomes less dense. But it still contains enough. You know, when you're dreaming, you're still your individual narrative. You are still the individual egoic body and mind in many ways. The more spiritually awake you become, this stops happening. But so that's what's happening. We have the solid body and mind, but it's expanding. And so when we're dreaming, you know, that's why it's kind of, you feel like you're just in that cloud of pure imagination, right? That's what's happening. Now, when we fully aren't even dreaming and we've fully expanded, we've just gone out into the full infinite universal consciousness. We've gone out into the full infinite universal consciousness, this heart shape here, beautiful. The whole, right? Different ways of saying whole, right? With the W at the front or with the H. The whole. Ladies. We've expanded all the way out in the dreaming state to the whole, and boom. Now we are just pure infinite universal consciousness. But sadly, the dream has to end. And the dream ends and we condense until we are back down to that tiny, limited, finite body and mind. Finite comes from fine, which means line, so it's like to draw the line around. Suddenly, it's so sad. You are having a lovely dream filled with magic. You could fly all over the shop. There were no dentists, and there was a lot more of the other stuff. And now you're out of that dream, and you're back in the solid rules. And in order to make the things happen that you want to happen, you have to abide by all these flipping rules. Right? No more flying. Yet. Because, you know, what happens at the end of everything, when you really go into the big sleep, that exact same thing. We expand into the cloud of beautiful dream, no more condensing. We don't recondense down into that finite body and mind, and you won't miss it, team. You won't miss it. You really won't. We expand, and for the last time, we don't recontract. We expand into the dreaming, and then it depends on, I guess, your experiences of life. The end of it all, in the big sleep, you were in that condensed, finite body and mind. It's expanded, beautiful, into that cloud. And I don't know how I know this, but I kind of get it in a funny, intuitive sort of way. You get a choice. Get a choice. You can either recondense as a different solid body and mind. Might even be on a different world with different rules. Less gravity, less laws, less solid. That might happen when you recondense if you choose to. Or you might decide you've had enough of all that. You can stay in the cloud of dreaming for as long as you wish. This is why people have near-death experiences and speak about these sorts of experiences. Oh, it was amazing. I was flying. I was up in the clouds. Beautiful, I experienced heaven. Or a nightmare. You know, that's why we have the NDEs, okay? Now we can either recondense if we choose to, or we can simply choose to be done with the whole thing. Be done with the whole thing. And remain as the infinite universal consciousness, unmixed with any of the content of any further experience. Just consciousness itself. No further experience necessary. Rejoined the whole. Whole with a H could be whole in which all of our experience is sucked through. Like a black hole. Hole. So, I've spoken a bit longer than I was expecting to, so my sincere apologies for not having a sub 20-minute video. I am trying to do them, but maybe I got tangented off into what happens when we go to the big sleep, as well as just where do we go when we sleep. I hope there's some pointings and some understandings and learnings there that can help us burn through that gap in understanding. And just, this is a good one to really contemplate. A really good one to meditatively contemplate, because answering this one answers a lot of them. A lot of them. But the crucial point I would say to take away, to do for some homework, and the spiritual teaching assistant reminding you to make sure you do your homework, because this is an important one. The teacher's really, really interested that you get this test right. Is that the absence of awareness is not the same thing as the awareness of absence. You are always conscious of your experience, so experience never goes anywhere. Experience never winks out of existence because you're aware of a continual unbroken experience. And thirdly, there's no such thing as time anyway. So sleep actually confirms the reality that there is no such thing as time. You fall asleep and wake up in the same ever-present, eternal present moment. Fall asleep, wake up, it's the same moment. This is the same moment now as the moment you were born. That'll bake your noodle. It's the same moment. This is the very same moment. Oi, 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 oi. And just because you wake up and look at a clock is not proof that time exists. I don't need to expand on that one. It's self-explanatory. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate every single one of you for taking the time. I know it costs energy and attention to pay attention to these videos. I really appreciate it. If you could do me a huge favor, and if you have resonated with this or got something out of it, don't forget to whack that like and subscribe button. It helps me to grow the channel, to spread the message, and hopefully pour some of this spiritual bleach all over the flipping painting. Wash that painting clean until we have a nice bleached white canvas. Synchronicity, that's exactly it. That spiritual bleach, it whitens things, doesn't it? It purifies it. Let's get the paint off and have a nice blank canvas. Channel memberships are available. If you whack the old join button down below to gain access to my exclusive guided meditations and talks. Some of those guided meditations are based on Advaita, which is really taking the ski lift to the top of the mountain and escaping the stratosphere up into that infinite universal consciousness permanently. We also have the Discord chat room that you can gain access to if you join the old channel membership. And in the Discord chat room you will find a community of like-minded individuals who are committed to this path of awakening, this path of enlightenment, this journey of true healing. In that Discord, I started doing daily pointings. So every morning I drop a daily pointing in there. So every single day you can stay on this, stay on this, stay on this, stay on this. And if we stay disciplined and focused in our spiritual practice, we can end our own human suffering. Now, doesn't that sound nice? Quite a big claim, that, isn't it, really? Join the channel memberships and I'll end all human suffering. That is quite a big value statement, as we call it. I also have a book out. It's called Still Now, a guide to inner peace through spiritual awakening. Almost bungled my own book title there. Wow, I need more coffee today. So, I'll pop the link to the book in the first comment, pinned comment down below. But other than that, team, thank you so much for listening. We'll end it there. Take care, be well, and stay present.